I joined. And his view, aside from the company's commitment to quality and ethics and standards, his view was never take no for an answer. There is always a way to get to the right solution if you apply your mind. Don't take the hurdles that come in your way as the reason why you would move around them or give up. Or as in India, they say jugaad. Jugaad means you adjust for everything. He said, don't do that. That's the wrong way to do business. Go for it. Never take no for an answer. And the second thing that he taught me, which I think was tremendous, was that you're one person, but you're one person, you can make the difference. If you have the energy and the passion to drive in a direction, and if you know how to communicate well, which, by the way, is the most underrated attribute when you're young, but the most important attribute as you grow is your communication. And if you can do those two things well, then there's a whole new world out there. In truth, in my generation used to stay in careers for a long time, 30 years in one company. You guys are different, and I think you've got the right approach to it. Because if you don't try out new things, if you're not willing to take a risk, you will achieve very little reward out of the system the way it's constructed today. And so I'm a big encourager in saying, if you want to move jobs or you want to move roles within a company or you want to move companies or industries, think about it, but go for it. Don't procrastinate forever and don't hesitate forever. The example in Nigeria that the dean was describing was an example of getting financial inclusion to be part of this change. There's 2.5 billion people in the world who do not have what you and I take for granted: a bank account, an identity, a card, things that you think just work. You just go online and you want to order food from Kin Cow or from anybody, and it comes. Well, it doesn't work that way for these people. And so their lives are different. And that's got to change, because non-inclusive growth will destroy the feeling that I'm talking about of prosperity and growth in the US as well. The US, by the way, has 40 million people who do not have a proper bank account, just to be clear. This is, again, not a developing world issue. Developed Europe has 93 million people who do not have a bank account. Work-life balance is a very personal thing. There are guys who work 12 hours, 18 hours a day and think that they've got balance. There are others who work 6 hours a day and they think they've got balance. So I don't know how you define it for yourself, but for me, work-life balance requires, I guess, a couple of things to happen. One is you've got to enjoy what you're doing. You really have to. It's really, really critical. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's time to do something different. And that's part of the reasons why I've changed what I did over the years. Because if you're going to work as hard as we work, and I traveled probably 2/3 of the time. And if you're not going to enjoy what you're doing when you travel, why the hell are you doing it? And so work-life balance starts with enjoying what you do really well. At the same time, you've got to have time for yourself and the people who matter to you. I mean, by that I mean, not just helping the stupid habit of having a BlackBerry and an iPhone in your hand all the time. Honestly, you're not spending time with the people you're with. You're spending time with the instrument. And the instrument isn't your work-life balance. It's actually, in some ways, an invasion on your work-life balance. It's useful. Don't get me wrong. I use the darn thing all the time, but it's an invasion if you're not careful. So finding the right space that says, when I'm with you, I'm focused on you, you matter to me, and I'm going to spend time with you, as compared to I'm doing that, but also doing this, looking at my email, doing phone calls, taking out paper, working on the weekends. You've got to figure out how to find that balance. That's what work-life balance is. The rest all kind of works out. And then, that's not as much of an issue. In fact, you do stick out a mile when you look the way I do, and you kind of walk into a company which is a Fortune 50, Fortune 100 company, and you've got, as I said, 200,000 people at Citi who work for me. You've got to get comfortable with your skin and have a little bit of confidence in yourself as compared to worrying about what the other person is thinking about you. You're going to get stared at. I walked in today, I was telling you, and I was walking into your cafeteria, and why the hell is everybody staring and looking at me? And then I discovered you put my photograph on every table, which is the most embarrassing thing in the world. Yeah. And I walk in, there's this damn tent card everywhere. And like, oh God, no wonder they're staring at me. So that's not a good thing. But you can use that to your advantage if you care about talking to people. It's a great conversation opener. I've made friends who've talked to me about why I look the way I do, and they're still the best friends I've had out of a casual conversation. So not in work life. In your personal life, yeah, it can be quite an interesting thing. I mean, look, there are times like after 9/11 when life was very complicated for me. And I lived in New York City at that time, and I'd say the best way I could describe it to you is I got shouted at and abused with verbal abuse, no physical abuse, fortunately, many times. But you find your way through it because you realize that only 0.5% of the people, or smaller than that, are doing that. The other 99.5% of the people around you are actually on your side, and they care deeply about what you're feeling at that time. And so that kind of, if you have that strength, you can get through a lot of stuff. I mean, I still get randomly pulled out for checking at TSA. I'm the ultimate random check guy. But, what are you going to do? You can't fight that. You got to just take it with you. So personally, a lot of things come around you. My boss at Citi at that time was boss's boss's boss, was Sandy Weil. And he called me the second day after these issues erupted in New York City and said to me, listen, you're not going to fly commercially for the next few months. You can have the company plane, which I was not entitled to at that time, to go wherever you've got to go. I'm not taking a chance with you getting caught up in security at the airports. You're not going to do that. Rule 1. Rule 2, you need a car to bring you back and forth from home. I used to walk in Manhattan to work. You can have my car. And I used to still walk to work because dealing with it is more important than hiding from it. And yes, I got the looks and I got the odd comment, but I walked to work and I walked back. And once in a while, my boss used to come to my house and walk with me to work. That's pretty cool. That's leadership.
The question from Twitter is, it says, tough times. Seems everyone is trying to disintermediate you. Google, PayPal, now Bitcoin. Which of these make you lose sleep and why?
The only reason I lose sleep is my wife snores. I don't lose sleep otherwise. Sorry. She doesn't. So, just to set the record straight. Really it did. I think the second thing I picked up in my time in India, which I still use very carefully, is that I took diversity in India for granted. I just took it for granted. I grew up in the army. My dad was an army officer. I was an army brat. We moved regularly. You went to things in the local mosque and the local church, and I went to midnight mass, and I did all that. And I took it for granted because around me, people were Indians, but there were Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims, and people from the south of India are as foreign in some ways to a guy like me because of the language. But we're all Indians in some way. And I took diversity for granted. Then I came overseas and found that people make a big deal out of it. And I actually resent that in some ways because what I don't want to be is a tech mark in a box saying, I've got my Indian American who's got this, the guy who looks different, 2 women, 4 African Americans, 3 Japanese, 2 Chinese. This is bullshit. That's not what life's about. Diversity is about having people around you who don't think like you, don't walk like you, and don't talk like you. And if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it must be a duck. You need ducks and geese and miners and spiros around you in God's aviary. And that makes for an outstandingly diverse population who think differently, come from different backgrounds, have different experiences. And by the way, if you choose carefully, all the other formal aspects of diversity will fall into place. If you have sincerity about surrounding yourself with these different kinds of people. And I took that for granted in India, and I'll never take it for granted. Again, I focus on it with a great deal of energy to surround myself with people who are different from me.